back to my channel. In today's video, I want to sort of talk through an article, or a collection of articles I should say, that I read recently in Spectrum magazine, which is like an online autism magazine, entitled A New History of Autism, and it's in 3 parts. I read it today, I read all the parts, it was quite interesting. However, I didn't really learn anything new from it because I sort of feel that a lot of it was going over old turf that I was already fully familiar with, as I have read Asperger's Children, the book Asperger's Children, and I might have done a review on that actually some time back, and a lot of it was basically covered in there. So there's nothing new here. It says A New History of Autism, but I think this is quite well known now, and I did feel it was going over old territory that I already knew. However, it was still, excuse me, it still paid a recap. It's still interesting to go over it, even if it was already stuff I already knew. And this was published recently, November 2022. And as I say, it's in 3 parts. It's called A New History of Autism. So it basically says that in the past decade or so, the excavation of several long overlooked papers has called into question the primacy of Kanner and Asperger as the founders of the autism concept. So, for a long time, it was sort of taken as read that autism was kind of Asperger and Kanner's sort of brainchild, and it was usually Kanner who got most of the credit, but Asperger and Kanner were both sort of seen as the founders of the idea, at least of autism as a distinct diagnostic entity. Obviously the term autism itself was actually coined in 1908 by a Swiss psychiatrist of the name Eugene Breuer, who used autism in reference to schizophrenia, not as a condition or a diagnostic entity, but as a symptom of schizophrenia, referring to social withdrawal, isolation, self-state, which is essentially what it means, in schizophrenia, and I think also indeed in some other psychiatric conditions. Autism would just be used as a symptom. But it was kind of widely understood that it was Asperger and Kanner who first sort of drew attention to the fact that autism was actually a discrete clinical condition of childhood, not merely a symptom of certain psychiatric states, but that there was a distinct syndrome of childhood that they identified as autism. That was kind of the established history. Not anymore, indeed not for some time actually. As I said, when I read this, I already knew a lot of this anyway. I mean, it has been out in the open for quite some time now, it seems. But the article made a point that science and medicine do not advance via individual discoveries, but by the evolution of ideas. That's kind of usually widely understood, you know. You stand on the shoulders of giants. Who said that? It was who said that we stand on the shoulders of giants. Wasn't Einstein, was it? I can't remember. Anyway, someone said that. Yeah, you know, so it's not usually an individual who discover something all in their own. You know, ideas are evolved over many years by many different people. Now, so the article talks a bit about one such psychiatrist who talked about the syndrome, later diagnosed as autism, way back in the early 1920s, so quite some time before Asperger and Kanner got a footnote in history. This was back in the 1920s, in a clinic in Moscow. A young Jewish child psychiatrist of the name Grunya Sukharu, I can't pronounce that name, Grunya Sukhariva. And she actually published her findings in German papers, and the traits that she described in some of the children that came to her clinic exactly matched Kanner and Asperger's descriptions, and she called it autistic psychopathy. Interestingly enough, the same language that Hans Asperger himself later used. It's quite telling. She called it autistic psychopathy. By the way, psychopathy, as understood back then, does not have the connotations it has these days. It doesn't mean psychopath, it doesn't mean sociopath. It merely refers to someone at the borders between mental health and mental illness. Psych, referring to, obviously, the mind. Pathy, meaning disease. So it was a psychiatric term. It didn't have the sort of negative connotations that it has today. It did not mean, psychopath or any of those things. It was more a kind of description of someone with a particular mental health or disturbance of many, of different types. But yeah, so she called it autistic psychopathy. And a British child psychologist called Sula Wolfe in 1996 actually translated Sukhariva's 1926 paper. I would actually like to read that translation if I can find it online. So the question then is, why was Sukhariva's findings so seldom referenced in the history books? And one possibility is that it was sexism. She was a woman. It is not news that most credit goes to men when it comes to discoveries, even though many women are often involved but don't get the credit. So it could have been sexism. It could also have been anti-Semitism. She was a Jew. Or it could have been anti-Russian sentiment. So there are lots of different possibilities there. Okay, so I'm going to move over to video number 2 now to carry on this kind of rather potted history. So moving over to video number 2.